Divine grace. Tirabai Charanarvin Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada ki Ananta Kopi Vaishnava Vrinda ki ISKCON DBT Founder Charya Divine Grace Sri Prabhupada ki Namacharya Sri Haridasa Guru ki Hari Nama Sankirtan ki Jai Nitai Gaur all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees. all glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurandanitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayamrupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Judapadam Sri Guru Vaishnavanscha Sagrajatam Sahagana Ratanatam Vikamam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lita Sri Sakanvitam Sa Hey Krishna Karma Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Saptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sri Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesha badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Shakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasthaya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Sri Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate वासुदेवाय
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Surabhyay Namaha
Om Surabhyay Namaha.
Om Surabhyay Namaha
Om Surabhyay Namaha.
Om Surabhyay Namaha
Om Surabhyay Namaha.
Mukam karoti vasaram pangam langayate girim yakripatamaham vande srigaram dinatarinam yakripatamaham vande srigaram dinatarinam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We have a new visitor. Yes?
My sister's son.
Okay. Part of the family.
Not of me.
So we continue reading from first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, still in chapter 3, entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations, and today it is text number 26. Correct? Avatara
Avatara
He Asankyeya Arehe Sattva Vidhe Dvijaha Yatha Vidasinaha Kulyaha Sarasaha Syuhu Sahasrashaha Avataraya Sankyeya Hare Sattva Vidher Dvijaha Yatha Vidasina Kulyaha Rasa Syu Sahasrashaha Avataraya Sankyeya Hare Sattva Vidher Dvijaha Yatha Vidasina Kulyaha Rasa Syu Sahasrashaha Avataraya Sankyeya Hare Sattva Vidher Dvijaha Vidasina Kulyaha Sarasa Syu Sahasrashaha
अवतारा है संख्या हरे सत्त्वानिधे द्विजः यथा विदासेन कुल्यः सरसा स्युः सहस्रशः
Avataraaya Sankhyeya Hare Sattva Nidher Dvijaha Yatha Vidasinaha Kulyaha Sarasasyu Sahasrashaha
अवतारा ही
Sankhyeya
हरे सत्त्वानिधे द्विजः यथा विनाशिना कुल्यः सरसा स्युः
सहस्रशः
अवतारा है संख्या
अवतारा है संख्या
हरे सत्त्वानिधे द्विजः
Hare Sattva Nidher Dvijaha
यथा विधि
विदासिना कुल्यः
यदा विनादिस्य कुलयः
यथा विदासिना कुल्यः
यथा विदास्य कुलयः
सरसासु सहस्रशः
सरसासु सुलयः
सहस्रः
सहस्रा
सरसासु सहस्रशः
Avataraha,
अवतारः
incarnation,
incarnations
he
He
certainly,
certainly
asankyeyaha,
Asankyeyaha
innumerable,
innumerable
Harehe,
हरेः
of Hari,
of Hari,
the Lord,
the Lord,
Sattva Nidehe,
सत्त्वानिधेः
of the ocean of goodness,
of the ocean of goodness,
Dvijaha,
Dujaha,
the Brahmanas,
the Brahmanas,
Yatha,
Yatha,
so it is,
so it is
Avidasinaha,
Avidasinaha,
inexhaustible,
inexhaustible,
Kulyaha,
Kulyaha,
rivulets,
rivulets,
Sarasaha,
Sarasaha,
of vast lakes,
of vast lakes,
Shuhu,
Syuhu,
are, Sahasrashaha,
Sahasrashaha,
thousands of
thousands of
translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki.
Jai.
O Brahmanas, the incarnations of the Lord are innumerable, like rivulets flowing from inexhaustible sources of water. Kindly repeat after me. O Brahmanas,
O Brahmanas,
the incarnations of the Lord
the incarnations of the Lord
are innumerable,
are innumerable,
like rivulets
like rivulets
flowing from inexhaustible
flowing from inexhaustible
sources of water.
sources of water.
Report. The list of incarnations
the list of
of the personality of Godhead given herein is not complete. It is only a partial view of all the incarnations. There are many others, such as Sri Hayagriva, Hari, Hamsa, Krishnagarbha, Vibhu, Satyasena, Vaikuntha, Sadaboma, Vishvaksena, Dharmasetu, Sudhama, Yogeshwara, Brihad, Bhanu, and others of the bygone ages. Sri Prahlad Maharaj said in his prayer, "My Lord, you manifest as many incarnations as there are species of life, the men, the demigods, etc., just for the maintenance of the faithful and the annihilation of the unfaithful. You advent yourself in this way in accordance with the necessity of the different yugas. In the Kali Yuga, you have incarnated, garbed as a devotee. End of the prayer of Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada continues in the purport. This incarnation of the Lord in the Kali Yuga is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there are many other places, both in the Bhagavatam and in other scriptures, in which the incarnation of the Lord as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explicitly mentioned. Yeah, this is very nicely explained actually in the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We know that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami especially composed this very important work called Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, describing the life, pastimes and nature of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Many devotees actually wrote, just like there's a Chaitanya Bhagavat, and other important books in reference to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita is one of the foremost of such literatures. And in the very beginning, Chaitanya Charitamrita is divided into how many sections?
Adi, Madhya, Antya. 3 sections.
3 sections. Adi Lila, Madhya Lila, and Antya Lila. So Adi Lila is describing the first 24 years of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a young boy who at a very young age became a very big scholar. His name, he was known as Nimai Pandit. Nimai Pandit. I have to look through that. Nimai Pandit. So then Madhya Lila describes the activities of Lord Chaitanya from what age to what age? You should sit here where I can see you. You're hiding behind the cameras. Madhya Lila. Madhya means middle. So what are the middle pastimes of Lord Chaitanya? From what age to what age? What age did Lord Chaitanya take sannyas?
25.
Huh?
25.
24.
24.
24. Sripad Shankaracharya took at the age of 8. I was just reading a few days ago. I knew it was around 7 or so. At the age of 8, and Srila Madhvacharya took sannyas at the age of 12. His father didn't want him to take sannyas, but he took sannyas. So, Madhya Lila is from the time Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24 up until the age of 30. So Madhya Lila means the activities of Lord Chaitanya during those 6 years where largely he traveled all over India, went to Vrindavan, and brought so many people in the fold of Krishna consciousness. And then Antya Lila. Antya Lila means the later pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. How many years are the later pastimes of Lord Chaitanya? From what age to what age? From the age of 30 to 48. Means 18 years. During those 18 years, Lord Chaitanya resided in Jagannath Puri. Not only without leaving Jagannath Puri, but without leaving the small room in which he was staying. So in the Adi Lila, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he nicely establishes the nature and the identity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by quoting from so many shastras. Nowadays we have so many books in so many colleges and so many universities around the world. But actually before, maybe just a few hundred years ago, the only books that were considered important to publish, the only books that were considered important to write were sacred books, like Bhagavad Gita, like Srimad Bhagavatam, like Mahabharata, etc. Now the majority of books in the world, they are not sacred books. And therefore, previously people would only study, and therefore people would, just like the Goswamis, they're a very nice example. The Goswamis of Vrindavan were especially commissioned by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to study these ancient literatures. At that time mostly it was only sacred books that were existing. This was before the printing press was invented. What year was the printing press invented? Good question. A couple of hundred years ago. I mean, printing press, before, people used to write. How did people write before? Huh? Palm leaves. And what kind of pen they would get?
Feather.
There were no pens available on the market.
Feather.
Huh?
Feather.
Yes, peacock feather or other feather. And they would dip it in some kind of chemical, chemical, ink, some ink, type of, and they would write on palm leaf.
Some fruit juice.
The natural color.
Natural color, the fruit juice. Some fruits is
Fruit
there.
juice, yeah, actually they would not use chemicals. And there are still many, many of these manuscripts on palm leaves in many libraries, actually. So the point being that actually when the culture was such that the main topics of discussion were in connection with God, with Krishna, then it was people in general would hear about these different topics. And because Kali Yuga had already progressed, Lord Chaitanya wanted that, especially the Goswamis of Vrindavan and those who followed in their footsteps, that they especially establish the important position of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's amazing actually, in the Adi Leela, there are two wonderful things that the author, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, does. He begins by establishing the identity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, by quoting so many verses also. And then he spends a lot of time also bringing in so many, it's like, here is describing about there's like unlimited incarnations, and there are so many writings also, so many different scriptures that we are not familiar with because we don't read very much, unfortunately, and most of the writings, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, are not scriptures, they're just mundane, profane books. So that is why Prabhupada one time mentioned that his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he made a very important observation, very important statement that you should all know about and try to remember. So, Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj said that if all these different mundane books, ordinary books, books that are based on mental speculation, if all these books in all the libraries around the world were to burn, and only one book remained, Bhagavad Gita, there would be no loss. There would be no loss for losing all these books, which are actually taking us away from God consciousness, largely. And then he made another important statement that if all the books in the world were to burn, including the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavatam remained, there would be no loss. Because in the Bhagavatam, there are so many references to the Bhagavad Gita. So this shows how important is the Bhagavatam. And then he made a third statement. What is the third statement? You should remember this. Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that if all the books in the world, in all the libraries burnt, including the Bhagavad Gita, including the Srimad Bhagavatam, there would be no loss if the Chaitanya Charitamrita book remained. How important. Prabhupada, he told us there are 4 most important books for us. And Prabhupada gave us all these books actually. If simply one studies and reads these 4 books, what will happen? If he reads them attentively and regularly, he'll go back home, back to Godhead. Only 4 books. What are those 4 books? We begin with Bhagavad Gita. But Bhagavad Gita as it is. Not any Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Second, yes, Srimad Bhagavatam. And Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Prabhupada added Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. Nectar of Devotion, it is written in the back, the complete science of devotional service. Yeah. So these are like most important books. So here it mentions how there are, as also mentioned in the Brahma Samhita, Advaitam Achyutam Anadyam Anantarupam. Anantarupam means unlimited forms. The Lord takes on unlimited forms. Here it mentions as many species as there are. How many species are there? 8,400,000 different species. So in all of these species, the Lord incarnates, who takes the forms of these different species, just like it takes the form of, kurma, matsya, etc. Narasingha. Narasingha is a special form, not one of the combined species. Yeah. So let's just continue here. So there are many other places, both in the Bhagavatam and in other scriptures, in which the incarnations of the Lord, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is explicitly mentioned. So sometimes we think that, that the Goswamis in Vrindavan, invented something. Means that they, on their own, came to a conclusion that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not like that. They established the identity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu based on Shastra, which is a very important aspect in our Guru Parampara. To understand anything, we must support it by Shastra. What are the three ways in which we can verify if something is authentic and authorized? Shastra is one of them. There are two more.
Sadhu Guru.
What is it? Sadhu and Guru. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Whatever statement is made should be accepted by Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. Should be supported by Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So when we read this section in the Adi Leela, it's amazing actually. Because in so many Shastras, many of which are less known to most of us, the name of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu either directly or indirectly appears. Yeah. So this is what Prabhupada is mentioning here. And then Prabhupada continues, in the Brahma Samhita also it is said indirectly that although there are many incarnations of the Lord, such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, Matsya, Kurma, and many others, the Lord himself sometimes incarnates in person. Lord Krishna and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are not therefore incarnations. What is the name for incarnation in Sanskrit? Avatar.
Avatar.
So, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna, they are avatar. They are not avatar, they are avatari. Avatari means they are the source, the origin of all the avatars, of all the incarnations. This will be clearly explained in the text, in the next shloka. So the Lord is the inexhaustible source for innumerable incarnations, which are not always mentioned. But such incarnations are distinguished by specific extraordinary feats, which are impossible to be performed by any living being. That is the general test to identify an incarnation of the Lord directly and indirectly empowered. Some incarnations mentioned above are almost plenary portions. For instance, the Kumaras are empowered with transcendental knowledge. Sri Narada is empowered with devotional service. Maharaj Prithu is an empowered incarnation with executive function. The Matsya incarnation is directly a plenary portion. So the innumerable incarnations of the Lord are manifested all over the universes constantly, without cessation, as water flows constantly from waterfalls. Yeah, in the text itself, it mentions how these different incarnations are like rivulets. What's a rivulet? We have a rivulet. This is called a rivulet. Small river. Not big river. Rivulet. In another place, the example is given that the incarnations of the Lord are like the waves in the ocean. Did you ever try to count how many waves are in the ocean? Impossible to count. waves are constantly rising. So that means that actually this should be comforting for us. This should help us understand how compassionate and caring is the Lord. That the Lord, He manifests through all of these different incarnations for what is the main purpose. It's also mentioned here. To give to give association and benediction to his devotees, and to give trouble to the troublemakers. To annihilate the maniac. Yeah. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya sadhuskritam dharma samsthapanarthaya, and to establish the codes or the principles of religiosity or dharma. So the Bhagavatam is that literature that gives us an idea of these different incarnations, and we should know amongst all of these different incarnations, these unlimited incarnations who appear, they are all different, we can say, forms of Krishna. But of all of those different forms of the Lord, the incarnation, or what we know as the personality of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are different. They're very special because they the incarnation of means Krishna, when he descends, then he, what is one of the most important features of Lord Krishna's incarnation, or the incarnation of Lord Krishna? He actually, other incarnations, they come for so many different purposes, but this particular incarnation of Lord Krishna, which is followed whenever Krishna appears, only once in a day of Lord Brahma, then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also appears. Lord Krishna reveals himself as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and reveals also the nature of the spiritual world and the nature of what is meant to be our relationship with Him. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu further explains the nature of that relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these two incarnations, as mentioned here, are very special, very different than all the other incarnations. So this is Sutta Goswami, who continues to speak in Naimisharanya to the sadhus who are assembled, and he addresses them. O Brahmanas, the incarnations of the Lord are innumerable, like rivulets flowing from inexhaustible sources of water. And it is these different incarnations that are meant to be our topic of discussion. Just like we know how previously that was an integral part of the culture, Vedic culture, that from a very young age, uh, as a child, as a young boy, young girl, people they would be hearing all of these different extraordinary stories of different incarnations and different personalities and devotees. That was the subject matter heard and discussed. Nowadays that subject matter has changed completely. So any comments on this or questions?
Because every universe has different functionalities. I mean, but
Every universe has different functionalities.
so
Means
I mean every universe has different functions. I mean, there
every universe doesn't have a different function, but every universe has differences, just like every country is different from another country. But every universe is filled with conditioned souls who are suffering. And therefore the Lord appears in all the different universes, although the activities may differ. The activities do differ, just like even within one family. Every member of the family is different. Although they're living in the same family, everyone has a different nature because everyone is influenced in a different way by the modes of material nature. So that's happening within the family nucleus, and that's happening also within every universe. Just like we say that, in this country they have this culture, in that country they have this culture. But actually, there is only one real natural culture, eternal culture, which can make us happy. Everyone is trying to be happy in different cultures, alien cultures. Our original natural culture is the culture of the spiritual world. We call divine cultures. Divine cultures. So yeah, each universe is different, but it's the same, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Janmamritu Jaravyadi, in every universe, people are struggling with these four basic problems of life. And forgetting that those are the only real important problems. They are the most important problems to work out. All other so-called problems are very secondary compared to those four problems. So, I'm not sure if I got your question,
yes.
but although there's, unlimited universes, it's the same, it's like sometimes people will say, let me go to some other place, let me change job, let me go to another country. But actually, whatever we experience, wherever we are, we will experience in some other place. Because wherever we are, we carry our own mind. And it's our mind that is giving us all the problems, isn't it? When we become God conscious, when we become especially Krishna conscious, then our mind, instead of being our enemy, will become our most dear friend. And it's only someone who's a devotee who can actually make his mind into friend. And when our mind is our friend, we can deal and solve whatever problem may be there. But when our mind is our enemy, then we don't understand things properly, and we basically instead of solving problems, we are creating problems. Who creates problems in the world? We do. We think this one is creating problem, this one is creating, but no. Everything that is happening is because we're getting reactions to problems we have created. You see. Whoever is, let's say, not nice to us is our fault. That we should think. But our material way of thinking is that why this person is, angry at me, or why this person is doing something bad to me. So it's a different kind of understanding.
How to make a friend mind?
How to become friends with the mind. How to make friends with the mind. That is a subject matter that is discussed in detail in the Bhagavad Gita. So we make our mind to become our friend by following the good instructions that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, by cultivation of transcendental knowledge. See, intelligence is a higher faculty than the mind. That's nicely explained in the last, you should read the last verse of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita when you go home after Bhagavatam class. Very nice. Those last few verses, Arjuna is making reference to why all these problems with the mind. And in that last verse, Krishna is nicely explaining how we can only conquer over our material mind by developing, by higher consciousness, by developing, utilizing, cultivating transcendental knowledge. There is matter. Above matter there are the senses. Above the senses there is the mind. Above the mind there is intelligence. Intelligence there is, because that's all material. Above intelligence there is transcendental intelligence. There is, knowledge that we receive from Bhagavad Gita or from Shastra gives us, opens the doors to transcendental intelligence. Vidya Gyan. Vidya Gyan Ride Prakasita. Transcendental knowledge is actually already there within all of us, within the heart of all humanity. Transcendental knowledge is there, but it is covered. It is covered by Maya. It is covered by the guna, the three modes of material nature. Therefore, unless we rise above these gunas, we will always be caught up with material problems, material mind. So, the more we hear from Bhagavad Gita, the more we put into practice the teachings from Bhagavad Gita, from Bhagavatam, then slowly, gradually, our mind will become a best friend. And that will become like natural. Those who don't cultivate this knowledge, they remain at a lower level of consciousness. They remain on the material level of consciousness. Material level of consciousness is a lower level of consciousness than spiritual consciousness. So, therefore, through association of this transcendental sound vibration, association of devotees. When we come to a temple, we're associating with the vibration in the temple, like that. This is the greatest, let's say, challenge. This is the greatest challenge for everyone, even from young age. We don't realize so much, but from young age, actually from the age of 7, they call it the age of reason. We can start to understand, the age of reason. What's the age of reason?
7.
Huh?
No problem.
Prabhupada explains how small boys and small girls, when they are very small, they're just like animals. That's why they like to play with dogs. They become very,
Big boy is playing dog.
Yeah, well, what does that mean? Yeah. Animals are just like, they have no access to spiritual subject matter. So it means that actually from the age of 7, one is supposed to start thinking. But some people, even at the age of 70, they're still not thinking. And most people, from, even up to the moment of leaving their body, still not thinking. It's unfortunate, actually, because the human body has been given to think, to understand. That's why our acharyas, like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, gives us this wonderful song, Jeev Jaga. Jeev Jaga, wake up, wake up. Otherwise, sleeping condition, sleeping means unconscious. Unconscious means we are wasting our time and we are creating problems. We are creating problems for ourselves and we're creating problems for other people. And by creating problems for ourselves and for other people, we will get negative reactions. Negative reactions mean we'll suffer. Nobody likes to suffer, but we are the cause of our own suffering. There is no one else to blame except us for whatever suffering we are getting. Whether it's caused by our own body or by other bodies, other people's bodies.